Greetings. Today I want to talk about a subject that is absolutely near and dear to my heart. Normally I would have a screen behind me that says Hebrew roots, because you cannot deny our roots. But I really want to stress how important it is for Christians today to understand, and just people in general to understand, there's a huge anti-Christian Zionist movement occurring within the Christian community right now. You've heard some, if you're paying attention to politics, you've heard some of the names of some of the leaders, but I don't need to go there. But this movement is led by anti-Semitic Jew haters. I can't call them anything other than that. And they spout the same exact rhetoric that the Nazis used in the 1930s. They talk about that the Jews own all the newspapers, they own Hollywood, they own the press, they own everything. And so therefore the problems in this world is because of the Jews, And the question came about on one podcaster's podcast is, it really wasn't a question, it was a statement on his part that Christians have no obligation whatsoever to Israel because Israel's a nation. And so I want to really address that. We got to start off with who and what is Israel. We understand that in the beginning Israel was a wandering band of people. They weren't even called Israel at the time. There was Abraham and his family, large family, wandering around. And eventually Abraham became righteous in the eyes of God, and he's considered the first Jew, literally. The first Hebrew, actually. And then the Hebrew break off and spread out from Abraham. And we understand that all the biblical historical content where the 12 tribes of Israel are formed, right? Israel formerly being Jacob. And so it's the 12 tribes of Israel, and it is a people group at this point. But eventually, after they're freed from the bondage of Egypt, they're led into the land of milk and honey, which we know is pretty much Israel today. Of course, should have been much bigger, but today that's what it is. And God created a nation, whether you like to hear it or not. He gave them civic laws. Most Christians don't even bother with the Old Testament. They don't bother reading Leviticus and understand that God gave them laws to run a country by, civic laws. The question is then, what loyalty, if any, do Gentile God-fearing followers of the way, followers of the Messiah, have to either the people of Israel or the nation of Israel? So, as to the question of supporting Israel, there's just a couple of biblical passages I want to read to you. One is Genesis 12:3, God talking to Abraham. He says, "And I will bless those who bless you, and the one who curses you I will curse, and in all the families of the earth will be blessed." I mean, it's a clear statement what he's telling Abraham 3,000 years ago, 3,500 years ago. He's saying that I'm going to bless you. I'm going to bless those who bless you, and I'm going to curse those who curse you. And all the families of what? The earth will be blessed. And in Numbers 24:9, he says this, he lays down as a lion, and as a lion, who dares rouse him? Blessed is everyone who blesses you, and cursed is everyone who curses you. And he's talking about Israel, right? Whoever curses them will be cursed. Whoever blesses them will be blessed. And there are more verses that basically say the same thing. They talk about the nations, and that's really what the word Gentile refers to, as the nations, all other people other than the Hebrews. So, do we support Israel? The nation is to, well, to support the nation is to support Israel. It's just the bottom line. I mean, currently it is, because we know they were displaced for almost 2,000 years, again, because of hatred. So Ezekiel, we have to ask ourselves this question then, why should we? Let's read Ezekiel 36:24-28. God explains, I'll let you read it, but I'm just going to paraphrase it. God explains that he will cleanse the house of Israel and restore it. The temple, the house of God, will be rebuilt. Jerusalem is and will be the center, the capital of God's kingdom. I would ask, how is it that we should not support Israel if this is the case? Therefore, the people, and by default, the nation. More importantly, I ask you this: how do we as Gentiles fit into this whole thing, right? Because this is a Ezekiel's prophecy of the future, right? So how do we fit into this? Well, we read in Jeremiah 31 to 33 that God will establish a covenant with, this is really important for you to hear, the house of Judah and the house of Israel. In doing so, he will write the Torah, the law, upon their hearts and in their minds. And this is a move. This is a move from the written or the letter of the law to more of the spirit of the law, internalized in our hearts and minds. But what about the Gentiles then, right? How do they fit into this new covenant? Because that's what Ezekiel calls it, right? It's a new covenant. So in Ephesians 2, if you'll take the time to read it, Paul explains that the Gentile believers are to become one with Israel. It actually utilizes the words to become citizens of Israel. And I ask you, how does one become a citizen of a people? We cannot. But we can become adopted children of God, allowed into the house of Israel. And we can be made citizens of a nation. And Paul explains in 1 Corinthians that the Torah, the law, is likewise written in the hearts and the minds of the Gentile believers. Somebody asked him, well, how can these Gentiles know they don't have the law? And he explains to them, because God wrote it in their hearts and on their minds. You know, Paul tells us that there are going to be people who don't want to hear. They only want to hear what they want to hear. And John tells us that many will fall away. But more importantly, Jesus tells us in 7:21 to 23, Matthew 7:21, 23, he says this, and he's really clear about this: not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father who is in heaven will enter. Many will say to me on that day, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name, and in your name cast out demons, and in your name perform many miracles? And then I will say to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you who practice lawlessness. Jesus says that. Jesus clearly tells you that many people are going to come to the Lord and say, hey, look at me. And the Lord's going to look at you and say, I don't know you. Get away from me. And there is, but I went to church every day, every Sunday. I gave my tithes. I volunteered. I did this and I did that. And he's going to say, get away from me. I didn't know you. You know, many people are being misled today, because we are brothers and sisters with the Hebrews, the Jews, the Israelites. You know, Paul clearly tells us in Romans 11 that we were grafted in. Now, most Christians and pastors they'll envision this like you have this olive tree and all the branches are cut off. All the Jewish branches are cut off and thrown away for disbelief, and then all these Gentile branches are then sown in, Christian branches, and basically replace them. That's not true. It says some branches were cut off so that others could be implanted in, right? And I think that's really important that we understand that. So we are brothers and sisters with Hebrews, the Jews, and the Israelites. Because I don't know about you, but I want to protect my family. I don't want to have to we don't have to pick up swords to do it. Having a powerful United States and a powerful Israel is enough to keep enemy nations at bay. Think about that for a minute. Because the guy in the video said about picking up swords. Nobody's saying we should pick up swords. When the speaker in the podcast talks about Israel and the branding of theology with nationalism, God created both the people and the state of Israel. We are being called back. Well, I shouldn't say we. They are being called back to the land of Israel. Like Gentiles, not all Jews believe in God. And like Christians, not all, and the same things with Christians. Not all Jews are true believers. Not all Christians are actually true believers. George Barna, the researcher, says that about 40% of all those who attend church on a regular basis don't have a clue. They don't have God in their heart, right? History tells us that God formed them into a nation, and in the end, he brings them back together, and they started out as a wandering tribe, but God brought them together into one place, a place he chose for them. The speaker also was wrong as to why the prophets rebuked them. He brought up all these reasons, but he didn't talk about the real reason. Many Jews at the time turned towards other gods, the gods of the Gentiles that were in their land, or if they happened to be in somewhere else, to these other gods, these false gods. And at the same time, they continued to worship Yahweh, the God, the great I am. They did both at the same time. And if you read the Bible for yourself, you'll see that Jews did not chase empires as he claimed. Halfway through, I simply had to stop listening to the speaker's racist, anti-Semitic rant. He is basically a white nationalist, a modern Nazi, one of many who have infiltrated the church and are preaching a new, but albeit retreaded gospel. And when I say that is because we've been down this block already. 100 years ago, this is 2026, right? So this kind of crap started in the 1920s with the Nazi movement, and here we are, 100 years later, doing the same thing. I'm going to end with this, Tammy, because it's important. Podcasters, political and religious, prey upon those who don't read for themselves, those who don't study and research, but depend on being told what's what. Yeah. While the internet and podcasts have their place, because I love the internet, they have also become a powerful tool to manipulate people. So I urge all people to get their collective heads out of these podcasts, to stop listening to them. They have agendas. I have podcasts. I have an agenda, but my agenda is not to mislead anybody. My agenda is to educate people. So having said that, I hope you listen to this whole entire 12-minute and whatever second video. And I hope you understand, we are called to be supporters of Israel as Christians, because they're our brothers and sisters, because we have been grafted in, because we have been adopted as children of God along with the Hebrews. With that, I'm going to say thank you, and I hope you definitely learned something, or will pick up the Bible and read some of the things I talked about.